Hello, period 4. I wanted to go over factoring notes for those who are out, absent, couldn't be in class today, or for those who were in class today and want to go over the notes again. So follow along, write these notes in as I go through them, please. Okay. The first thing is to distribute. That is what we normally have been doing the last 2 in-class periods and the last 2 virtual days. You have been distributing. Whatever you do on the outside or whatever there is on the outside, you multiply by all the numbers on the inside. You're distributing the 3. So 3 times y is 3y. 3 times a positive 12 is a positive 36. Okay, so that's not new. What is new is factoring. Factoring is the exact opposite of distributing. Okay, so today they're going to start us with 3y plus 36, and they want us to factor out. Sometimes we're going to factor out a greatest common factor. Other times we'll factor something out specifically that they ask us to, like is the coefficient. But for right now, they want us to factor out a 3. And if you do 3 divided by 3, you get 1y. And if you do 36 divided by 3, you get 12. So 3y plus 36 is the exact same thing as 3y plus 12. Because again, 3 times y is 3y. 3 times 12 is 36. So those two things are the exact same thing. When we are factoring, it is the opposite of distributing. So we're just going to do the exact inverse of what we've done the last couple days. Okay. This next part, factoring is taking the common factor back out of an expression instead of distributing it into the expression. So when you distribute, obviously you're multiplying it by both numbers. When you're factoring, you're taking it out of the expression. Okay? So to break it down very detailed, they're going to give us the problem 6a plus 24. Okay, we are going to factor that in a moment. However, here's the thing that you are thinking about. You're wanting to find factors of both 6 and 24. So remember that factors are numbers that you multiply together to get 6. Maybe in elementary you did factor rainbows. 1 times 6, 2 times 3. Those are all factors of 6. Okay, factors of 24, all the ways to get to 24. 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6. Those are all the ways to get to 24. Okay, so the next thing you want to do is see what they have in common, or the greatest common factor. Okay, so if you look up at the factors that we just listed, they have a 6 in common. So it says try to factor out a 6 because it is the greatest common factor. It's also the coefficient. Remember, the coefficient is the number in front of the letter. Okay, so now that we've decided what number we're factoring out, we'll try it. Okay, so we're right here, 6a plus 24. We're going to factor out a 6 because that's what 6 and 24 have in common. And if I do 6 divided by 6, I get 1a. If I do 24 divided by 6, I get 4. Okay? What I'm going to want us to do is every single time we do this, we factor, I want us to do the problem again and distribute to make sure our signs are correct. Eventually, these problems are going to get a lot longer. The signs are going to be positive, negative, fractions, decimals. You need to redo the problem by doing 6 times A is 6A. 6 times a positive 4 is positive 24. Make sure this answer matches that answer. It does, so I know that I factored it out correctly. Okay? So it's an easy way to check yourself. If it doesn't check back out, you know you've done it wrong. You need to redo it. Okay, what about here? What can we factor out? We have 5s plus 30. So again, you're asking yourself, what do both 5 and 30 have in common? What factor do they have in common? Well, 5 is prime. The only way to get to 5 is 1 times 5. 30 is 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, 4 and 5. Again, that 5 is what they have in common. So we're going to factor out a 5. 5 divided by 5 gives me S. 30 divided by 5 gives me 6. And then I want us to make sure it makes sense. 5 times S is 5S. 5 times a positive 6 is a positive 30. This answer matches the original answer, so I know that I factored it correctly. Okay, hopefully you're getting the hang of these. 4p plus 100. Factor that they both have in common. Well, they have a 2 in common, but you always want to choose the greatest factor they have in common. So that would be a 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1p. 100 divided by 4 is 25. So that's what it should look like. And check it. 4 times p is 4p. 4 times a positive 25 is positive 100. This matches this, so I know I factored correctly. Okay. Okay, let's look at this one. Before, when we were looking at the numbers, it was always kind of the coefficient, the number in front of the letter. Here, 16 is not the greatest common factor. They do not have 16 in common, okay? So what do they have in common? If you're not sure, put 16 and 10 into a division ladder to find the GCF. They're both even. Nothing else can go into 8 and 5. 2 is our greatest common factor, okay? So they have a 2 in common. 16 divided by 2 is 8z. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Let's distribute to make sure this makes sense. 2 times 8z would be 16z. 2 times a positive 5 would be a positive 10. This matches this, so I know I factored correctly. Okay. On to the back. Let's look at the next one. 12v plus 3. Think to yourself, what is the greatest common factor? The number that they both have in common is a 3. So I'm going to put 3 out here. 12 divided by 3 is 4v. 3 divided by 3 is 1. Distribute. 3 times 4z, or v, is 12v. 3 times a positive 1 is a positive 3. This matches this, so I know I've factored correctly. Okay. And then 8 plus 12r. Think of the greatest common factor for both 8 and 12. If you're not sure, do a division ladder. 2 goes into both these numbers. 2 goes into both of them again. Greatest common factor is 4. So pull a 4 out. 8 divided by 4 is 2. 12 divided by 4 is 3r. Distribute. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times a 3r is 12r. This matches this. I know I factored it correctly. Okay. Some of you may be asking, do I have to go back and do this part and distribute? Yes, you do. Okay. Okay, here's what I would like for you to do. I would like for you to pause the video and try the next 3. This one, and this one. And then unpause the video to see if you got them correct. Okay. Okay, the next one, 2a minus 24. The greatest factor that they share is a 2. So left inside, 2 divided by 2 is 1a. This is a minus sign now. 24 divided by 2 is 12. Now, let's double check our work. 2 times a is 2a. 2 times a negative 12 is a negative 24. That matches the original expression, so my factoring is correct. Over to the right, 5s minus 30. 5 is the greatest common factor, leaving me with s minus 6. 5 times s is 5s. 5 times a negative 6 is negative 30. And finally, 40 minus 56. A factor that they have in common is an 8 is the greatest common factor. 40 divided by 8 is 5. 56 divided by 8 is 7x. I need a subtraction sign there in the middle. 8 times 5 is 40. 8 times a negative 7x is a negative 56x. This matches this. I know I solved it correctly. Okay, and then let's look at the next one. So I have 4 plus 12h plus 32. Before you start with this one, there are some constants that you can combine or combine like terms, okay? So 12h is by itself. We can leave that alone. There's nothing to combine that with. 4 plus 32 is 36. Now, greatest common factor of 12 and 36. You guys know this, but just in case you don't, do a division ladder. 6 times 2 is 12. 12 is the GCF. Okay? Erase that so I've got some room. All right, so I'm going to factor out a 12. 12 divided by 12 gives me h. 36 divided by 12 gives me 3. Double check, make sure it makes sense. 12 plus h is 12h. 12 plus a positive 3 is a positive 36. So I must be right. Okay. Alrighty. So next section says, what if there were no variables, meaning letters? Could you still factor? Okay, yes you can. We're going to think about the GCF again, and we're going to factor out the GCF. So if it just says 15 plus 20, we're going to find the greatest common factor of 15 and 20. You probably already know. However, in case you don't, or you want to make your notes very precise and detailed so you can go back and look at them 3 weeks from now and remember how we did this, put it in there. Do a division ladder. 5's your greatest common factor. Okay, so we're going to factor out a 5, and then you're going to do the same thing. 15 divided by 5 is 3. 20 divided by 5 is 4. So we have 5 times the quantity, 3 plus 4. When you go to double check, 5 times 3 is 15. 5 times 4 is a positive 20. Next one, find the GCF of 24 and 8. Greatest common factor of 24 and 8 is 8. 24 divided by 8 is 3. 8 divided by 8 is 1. So I have 8 times the quantity, 3 minus 1. Distribute. 8 times 3 is 24. 8 times a negative 1 is a negative 8. Okay. And the last set of problems, it says, well, what about this? How would this change things? Well, it doesn't, okay? Kind of ignore those variables for a moment and just think of 2 and 100. What factor does both 2 and 100 have in common? What is the greatest common factor? 2. So we're going to factor out a 2. 2 divided by 2 leaves me with 1p. And 100z divided by 2 leaves me with 50z's. Just don't forget the variables. 2 times p is 2p. 2 times a negative 50 is a negative 100z. This matches this. It checks out. We do these no differently. 4h plus 12j plus 24k, there's nothing to combine. They're all different variables, so we can't combine them. So you're looking at the number 4 and 12 and 24. What is the greatest factor that all three of them have in common? 4. All three numbers have a 4 in common. So we're going to factor out a 4. And instead of just 2 numbers inside the parentheses, we'll have 3. 4 divided by 4 leaves me with 1h. 12 divided by 4 leaves me with 3j. 24 divided by 4 leaves me with 6k. And then double check your work. 4h, 12j, 24k. Alrighty. And the last one, we have a negative 3h, negative 12j, and a 24k. Again, they're all different variables. We can't combine anything. So we're just going to look at 3, 12, 24. What do they have in common? A 3, okay? I'll talk about this in a second, but this one's negative, third one's not. I'm going to go ahead and just factor out a negative 3. They do have a 3 in common. I'm going to factor out a negative 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1h. 12 divided by 3 is 4j, and you're going to have to start thinking about the signs. I need a negative 12j when I distribute, so that means I need a positive there, because a negative times a positive is a negative. And then 24 divided by 3, I'm going to put a negative 8k. And this is when the signs get tricky. This is why we always go back and distribute to make sure our signs make sense. And we may have to change these signs inside, okay? Negative 3 times h is a negative 3h. Negative 3 times a positive 4j is a negative 12j. And a negative 3 times a negative 8 is a positive 24k. So double check this with the original problem. It looks like it all came out evenly, perfectly, so I know I did it correctly. Okay, now if you were to factor out a positive 3 there, you could. It would change the signs on the inside, but then when you distribute it, you'll get the same answer. Okay, so either one would work. Okay. Alrighty, guys. Tomorrow you're going to do some practice problems with those. Make sure to go back, review the video again if needed. Let me know if you have any